Welcome to Creating Abundance with Alana Cahoon, sharing inspirational stories from experts around the world. Tap into your inner wisdom at alanacahoon.com. Welcome to Creating Abundance. I'm Alana Cahoon. Today's guest is Maureen Whitehouse, a spiritual teacher and miracle mentor. She is an expert in experiencing enlightenment in the midst of normal life. She has authored best-selling books like Soulful Eating, crafted dozens of programs, and has given hundreds of international lectures. Her simple teachings are based on firsthand experience and her practice of A Course in Miracles. Maureen is here to talk to us about Miracles Demystified, the 3 steps that will reveal miracles to you when you need them most. Let us welcome Maureen. Hi.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. This
Oh
is
my
really
gosh. It's so great to have you here. So,
yeah.
Maureen and I just met last week. Is that correct? Was it last
Yeah,
week?
well, yeah, a little over a week. Yeah. Feels
Yeah.
like a long time for some reason. It feels like I've known you forever. So,
Yeah, same here. So we were both attending the Soulful Leadership Retreat in Orlando, Florida, and we were, without knowing it, we were sharing a condo together, and that's where we met, in the condo. It was big, beautiful, spacious condo, and then it turns out that our paths have crossed many times.
that's right. How fun. And not unusual in the world of the miraculous that synchronicities become kind of the norm and expected.
Yeah, I used to
These are
say,
pretty great synchronicities. Yeah.
I love it. I often say, welcome to my world. And now I can use a new term. This is typical in the miraculous world.
Yes, yes. So do you want to say the one fun one that we found out early on, how we
Yeah.
lived on
Okay.
the, yeah,
Sure. So I'm like, well, I used to live in New York City for 10 years. And you said, oh, I lived in New York City too. When did you live there? Oh, the 80s and 90s. Gee, I did too. Well, where did you live? And it turns out we lived right down the street from each other on the
right
exact
on
same
the street.
block, like a few apartment doors down, right?
Yeah, at the same time. So we probably crossed paths multiple times.
Absolutely.
Really
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. And we were in similar life paths or career paths, right? You were,
Great. At the
um,
time, I was a model and a commercial actor, and
and
you,
I was a singer, songwriter, actress.
yeah.
Yeah. Stage
So
actress.
different lives, kind of different worlds that than now, but that was an interesting path, and I believe it really led me to have more introspection, more of a desire to be real in a world that can be kind of based on superficiality and the illusion of things, prop her up, have her bite and smile for a commercial or dress her in things and it felt very outwardly superficial to me, and it really caused me to go deeper, deeper, deeper in introspection at that time.
That makes perfect sense. I remember very similarly, that's when I really dove into my holistic health studies, and I
Hmm.
became an active member of uh, the the Open Center down in
Yeah,
Soho.
yeah.
Yeah,
I've,
probably for very similar reasons, because there's a lot of surface level, you know, living or working in on the stage and in television.
yeah, so actually I was a faculty at Open Center, but years later, like kind of go back after I had published books and things. So that was fun to come full circle as having been like a participant. We were probably at classes at the Open Center together.
I know.
Yeah. Very fun.
It is fun.
So here we
Yeah, so
are.
here we are. So tell us a little bit more about your story, because it's so interesting how you were spiritually awakened.
Yeah. So I began after living in Manhattan and New York City and modeling in Europe and all over the place. I wound up settling and having my family in Boston area. And so I kind of went from big fish in a smaller pond in Boston rather than New York. And so I was working a lot as the young mom in commercials. I had on my resume good with dogs and kids. And so I was like the one that did a whole lot of things that were oriented towards the person that was the next door neighbor kind of person. And everything was really going great because it appeared that my life would be the one that anyone would want, like the American dream. Nice home, white picket fence that I painted myself. I could set anything up to look like a commercial set. So my own home and life looked beautiful. I had the kid and the dogs and even the husband that could be like on commercials with me. And
Wow.
everything looked like a picture perfect life. But I felt this emptiness inside me, like what's missing here. Like I was saying about it started when I was in New York City in the beginning. Like I'd try to find churches or places I could go just take a breath. I wasn't a meditator at that time, but I just knew gotta kind of like keep going back in to be able to feel what's real. If this can look so good on the outside, but it doesn't feel real. So yeah, so one time I was between auditions and I was in Boston and there used to be a little bookstore that I'd frequent and called Hari San in right outside Boston. And I wandered in there looking for the next self-help book because I wound up, like devouring Power of Positive Thinking and all those things, new thought books and things when I was in New York.
You
And
could have
and
just visited me and taken all of the books off of my shelf.
there we were down the street from each other. How funny. And so I wound up going into this bookstore and went to the shelf that had all the self-help books and was like, read it, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, oh, I feel like this is my last resort. I have to find if there's more than this, please guide me. And I looked over underneath the front window of the store, and there was a shelf underneath, and there was this book that was kind of glowing at me. And it scared me a little bit, but I went over and I opened it up, and it fell open to the page that in a lesson in A Course in Miracles. It was A Course in Miracles, and it read, I am not a body, I am free, for I am still as God created me. And I just started crying right in the store. You can feel it
Oh,
because
yeah, how
my
powerful.
whole life was I'm a body. I'm a clothes hanger for the clothes. I'm a like, here's my house all propped up beautiful. And I started crying. I closed it. I bought it. I didn't even spring for the hardcover. I got the soft cover at the time because I was like, still, I don't know about this. But when I brought it home, I put it on a shelf in the living room and I'd walk by it every so often. I got to read that book someday. I got to read that book. And then finally, I sat down with it in the living room when my kids were at school and nursery school and no one was in the house. And I started to read it. And it hit me so hard that I could feel the words were real. Didn't understand all of them, but I hid it under my couch so that no one would know that I'm doing this. It was felt like this is my own little private world. Didn't want my husband like making any comments or anything about it. And it was a Course in Miracles. So I thought my first miracle would be like, get a national commercial because then you get residuals and it'll be money flowing in.
Makes
Little
sense.
did I know that over the next like 2.5 years, I took me to do the 365 lessons that
Oh, within the book then. So you invested 2 years of your time really delving into the book and its lessons.
so if it said something like today you're the light of the world, which says things like that in a Course in Miracles very frequently, I I tried to be the light of the world. Like I literally said, I'm going to do this. And so if it took me 4 days or 5 days to be like, and at the end of the day, I'd mess up and I'd say, I'm not Mother Teresa. And I'd try my hardest to have it be really effective for me. But it took me 2.5 years. And then during that time, I often felt kind of stupid because I didn't really get it. And it's so affirming and so positive that I was wondering, like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not getting this? And so I started to ask the voice of the voice of Course in Miracles, if this is real, then help me, help me personalize this for me. And I started hearing, the the voice of the Course in Miracles is Jesus. So he became my mentor, personal mentor, not the
Oh,
guy in the
beautiful.
front of the churches on the cross, the guy with the sandals, and the one
Yeah.
who would say, "Look, you're just like me. You don't believe me, I'll wait." And so I did that with him, and then finally he said, after I had forgiven everyone in my world, I realized I had to forgive myself. And didn't really know what that meant, but I got on my knees in the gesture to like really, really show my sincerity, got on my knees in my living room and said, I forgive you, Maureen. And the bliss I felt in that moment of, I never have to do that again. I'm the common denominator of all the problems in my own life. And I started to feel this like all that burden lifted off of
Wow.
me.
How powerful.
Yeah. And then I wound up, he said to me, you've reached the point of chasm between my world and your own. You're about to experience the great resolve. And I didn't know what that meant, but I knew and I trusted after having been, years now of hearing how to personalize these lessons for myself. I said, well, that sounds good, and didn't see what that would mean. But I went to bed that night, and my husband was out of town, and my kids were with me in the bed next to me because I was a fearful person, still fearful. Had the alarm on the house and the dog propped at the window, and I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, which typically would have terrified me because I knew I wouldn't go back to sleep. And I'm in this big house and I'm vulnerable and everything. And instead, I felt that sense of elation that I had in the afternoon. And I just said, well, I believe in miracles. I had a little bit of cramps in my stomach. Heal this. And I went shooting out of my body into the heart of God, which is unnameable, undescribable. It's the experience of absolute love. That word is just so small to describe, but it took me years to be able to, if I ever told this to anyone, I just couldn't stop crying because of the beauty of how much and impeccably we are loved and what really does run the show. Maybe not our crazy illusory show that we have all the pain and problems, but
Yeah.
the utmost love that is behind all of our every breath. So I came back down in layers that were similar to near-death experience, where the most impactful one, that in that state, I felt like being wrapped in a soft down comforter of love. Like there is nothing but just absolute love. And when I came down and had that, life revision of a near-death experience, the interesting thing was I saw all the painful parts of my life, not just my whole life, but the painful parts. And I felt this rolling, thunderous chuckle that said, now you see how I see. Now you see how I see. And everything that had been painful was now with these eyes of knowing I'm one with the divine. Like, what was I thinking? I thought these small, impotent thoughts. I catastrophized everything. This is hilarious. And I saw even the most painful things in my life as that was hilarious. You convinced yourself that you were small. And when I came out of it, I had no idea what happened. And I woke up and looked at the clock. It was 7:30 in the morning. I now know that I know I was breathless because I came back with like this and back to my body. And I since been to India many times and studied yogic traditions, and that's a state of what they call Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the at oneness with God. It's what the Yoga Sutras try to bring people to.
Yeah.
And so I went to compose myself because I was shaking. I see my kids next to me, and I know I have have to bring them to school. I went to the bathroom to compose myself and to splash cold water on my face. And when I came up, I saw myself without a body. I saw my face looking at me with this radiance, and my eyes were so, I can't even describe the love that I was looking at myself with. And I, for the first time, said, that's all of us. That's all of us. We don't know that. And that's where the origination of all our problems comes from. And I said, that being was more beautiful. And I had worked with the most beautiful people in the world for all those years as a model. And this being was 10,000 times more beautiful than anyone I had ever seen.
Yeah.
I almost fell to my knees right away. I almost couldn't contain and stay on my feet. That didn't stop from that point. I saw the world unfiltered by an ego for the next 3 days.
Oh,
I
how magnificent.
Everything that we walk, I was going, I had to get a greeting card for a relative. I went to Kmart at the time. Remember being in the parking lot and seeing people with the shopping carts, and seeing a woman walk past a guy and say, "Oh, you missed it. That was set up for you." Like I could see that everything we experience is extraordinarily done for us to awaken. The smile, even just a smile to somebody that you walk by that we miss, is the gift and grace in that moment. I wound up having to go to the craft store because one of my daughters had a an art project, and I went to the craft store and saw a woman wheeling her daughter who had been in a wheelchair that and kind of twisted and nonverbal, and she had only a tray in the front of the wheelchair that had a button that said yes and no. And
Oh, this is such a powerful, moving story. It's
I
incredible.
remember seeing her and thinking, she's exquisite, like exquisite.
Exquisite. Mm.
Hard to look at this beautiful girl in this body, pretending she's a body for all those that are around her, pretending that she has limitations. And I kept I remember I was kind of sneaking around the corner so I could continue to see her without staring.
Yeah.
And I went up in front of her as I was looking, and I said, "Do you know how beautiful you are?" Like in my mind,
Yeah.
hit the yes button.
Oh, and you hadn't said it out loud.
No.
Yeah, she heard you.
Things like that at school dropping my kids off, I saw love, meeting love in the parking lot with the parents and the kids. It was the grass was like splintered emeralds, and birds were singing, the unfiltered without an ego. We are living in absolute heaven of
How?
of our co-creation with the divine. We come here to play at an idea that we could possibly be separate from the divine, impossible, and to enjoy our own experience of godliness and creating a life that is miraculous. We're all miracles. We're all miracles.
So this is wow. I mean, how do you describe what you just experienced? I've never heard anyone experience such depth of God's love, presence, perception, and then living in that state for several days and seeing through God's eyes.
Through God's eyes, the
Yeah.
entire time, unfiltered love, unfiltered perfection. And and knowing 100,000% that anything that ever looked like it wasn't heaven had been my perception, my limited beliefs. And interestingly enough, what happened next is, I wanted to know what happened to me. I still didn't understand what happened to me. I knew Jesus had said this is the great resolve, but I thought that everybody who did the work of A Course in Miracles was like this. I really literally did. So
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, how did I not see these people? Like, where are they? So I went to my first Course in Miracles meeting in a suburb of Boston, like shortly after that, to kind of see, like, who are these people? What am I going to see? And when I got there, it was holiday time and it was a small meeting in someone's home. And when I got there, I realized that I thought maybe they were all on vacation or things, didn't know. But they started talking about their problems and pain. And I was incredulous, like that they must know more about A Course in Miracles than me. They're having like a meeting. And how could they think that pain is real anymore, if they've been doing the lessons? And so at one point, one of them was talking about some pain, and I said, "Oh," I started to show what. No, that's not what it looks like. And I said a little bit about what I was experiencing to see if they knew anybody that
Yeah.
knew this. Didn't I was very private. I mean, I hid that book on purpose because I'm a very private person. I like being a model because I never had to open my mouth, model. And I was not expecting to say anything about myself. I went to be a fly on the wall, but I could see through the pain they were experiencing. And I didn't know I could because I didn't, this was all new to me.
Yeah.
And so I said some things, and then they were kind of like incredulous of how do you know this? And started to describe a little bit of what I was experiencing, had experienced, just to see if they knew anyone. And they didn't kind of like, I thought, well, that when I left, I was like, well, that was kind of, I was like a freak. Like I'm never going to go do that again.
Yeah.
And a few days later, the woman whose home it was called me up and said, we'd like you to come back to the meeting. And I said, "Oh, well, thanks very much, but I think not for me." And then she said, "No, please come back." And then she had another person call me
Huh.
to come back. So I was like, "Well," she said, there'll be more people there." And I thought, "Well, good. Maybe there are people who could tell me." When I got there, the place was packed. It was like rooms and it was packed, standing room only packed. And I
In
was like,
someone's
"Oh,
living
yay."
room? Is
Yeah,
that
in her home, she had like three rooms that were near each other, and
okay?
it was all
Yeah.
packed, like to the people
Sure.
coming up the stairs, coming in. And
You were
I
the
sat
star
down.
attraction.
I had no idea. I
Yeah.
had no idea.
So how
And then
did
she
that pan
said,
out?
we want you to meet Maureen. And I was like shocked, shocked. I did not expect that.
Yeah.
But what happened from there, I spoke a little. I still wasn't comfortable. But what happened from there is I started facilitating meetings and things. And
Oh,
because people came with their pain, they just kept coming. And so that's what's the last 26 years has been people, like a steady stream of people coming in their life's greatest challenges. I worked in hospitals and prisons and schools, and where kids were having challenges with each other.
so
And
this is the beginning. This is how you became a healer.
yeah, or owned my own mystic capacity. I believe we are all mystics, and that's the benefit of meditation is when we get out of our mind and come into that still space. That's where
Yes.
our true being upwells from,
That's
as you
beautiful.
know. And
Yes.
and I believe that we all came here, and why we have so many challenges and problems is because, come on, if you're a divine, you came here as divine to experience your divinity on earth, even while limited to a physical body. Every problem would be not admitting that at its core.
So how do you live in the world with this full mystic ability and the ego
Interesting.
as yourself? How and it looks like you know your story is so profound, Maureen, and I'm so grateful that you're sharing it and sharing your gift with healing and teaching people and leading these groups, etc. But we're still in a dense
Yeah.
world in the earth plane. And so how does one have, I think you had mentioned it, living in the mystic ability in this kind of
In
normal
human
life?
form.
So
Yeah.
how do you do that? And others who may have similar mystic abilities, how can you safely maneuver the world and continue to see through the kind, compassionate, loving eyes of God?
Yeah. Actually, safely maneuver, that becomes a no-brainer because literally it is a no-brainer. Our intuitive selves are much more impactful and powerful and capable of navigating this life, especially this, wild, crazy world that people are intent on believing is real here, so they perpetuate it. But when you tap into that true self, and I will tell you this, there's a couple of things that have to get out of the way before you can tap into your true self. Judgment. Judgment is always going to color something in a way that you're micromanaging against it. And I realized very early on in those first days that, like, I went to the supermarket. Oh my God, go to the supermarket with no filter, and you're seeing things from all over the world that you could just pick off a shelf, and like that cow eating the grass had to produce that milk that's in that ingredient, that's in that. There are thousands of things and people that come into every one thing, the trucker, and just picking
Right.
up a can, but feeling and seeing the infinity of
Mm.
experiences that went into that is mind blowing. And I remember being in an aisle and looking down to the end of the aisle and seeing the butcher counter. And at the time, I had been a vegetarian for a very long time, since college. And I remember saying to myself, thank God I've never judged anyone who was a carnivore, omnivore, whatever anybody is. I only just ate what I knew was right for me. And I
Mm.
remember knowing that what we judge is literally we create the scenario and walk into it. I never had one conflict with anybody that wasn't vegetarian. I never judged it, but I never knew that's why I didn't have a conflict. I respect everyone's choices, but I didn't know that's what made it peaceful. When we judge something, it's literally like you slap a new picture onto life that you have to then walk into in order to learn how not to judge, because you're never going to be free if you're still judging. Ever. There's no possibility to be free. The divine in that heart of God, there's no judgment. And I remember, oh, now I remember why the life revision started. I had forgotten this. While my first thought in that thoughtless, beautiful, formless, blissful oneness with God, the first thought I thought was, there's no judgment here. I had grown up Catholic, and part of our God image was judgment.
Yes. Yeah.
Most religions.
Hmm.
And on the heels of there's no judgment here, that's when I got thrown into the life review. No judgment. It was me judging myself. Any pain or problem I had had. No judgment from the divine. The laughter and the chuckle was, now you see how I see. You've been perfection all along. You
Oh,
were the
how
one who judged yourself
beautiful. You have been perfection all along.
all along. But that's all of us. Again, when I looked in the mirror, I wasn't saying, oh, how beautiful I look. I was like, my God, this is who we all are.
Yeah.
And we don't
Our
know.
soul self. It's our spiritual self. And as you shared, it's the intuitive. If we listen, really truly listen to our intuitive nature, which is our soul self,
Right.
then the answers are there. But it's
And
that,
so
yeah,
the
go ahead.
question you asked about how do you navigate this as a mystic, much more easily, by the way, because you get it. I get the joke that we all believe, and anyone who could appear to have a conflict with me, they just forgot. What am I going to do? Fight them and make them believe they're more of something they're not? So
Yeah.
it just makes you smile and realize, okay, I can remember who they are now if they don't. So I can show up a mirror to their divine self, even if they don't see. I'm certainly not going to leave heaven and stick around here. I'm staying here in heaven on earth for myself, but for everybody else I happen to encounter.
That's really beautiful. So you see earth as heaven.
I
And
see earth as heaven. I see
absolutely.
every, there is nothing but heaven, actually. Even if we are so supremely creative and can make an impossible dream seem real, like we all do, five senses, feel it, taste it, touch it, we all believe it's real. No matter what it is, if it's not love, it's not real. And so any of our fears or micromanaging here is trying to almost, it's what A Course in Miracles calls an illusion. That didn't hit me all those years of studying that. It was like, what do you mean illusion? I'm like touching a table.
Right.
I'm picking this glass up. It's our image of it that we have, that we created to be. And if we have limited beliefs about ourselves, we're going to limit everything to be this small, even if it's hugely, amazingly beautiful, we'll dim down our senses for it. So, no judgment. That's the number one thing. If ever I judge, I know I'm wrong, period. And so, how am I going to stay stuck in something? I'll be like, whoa, that's interesting. If that was a thought that I could have, I'm certainly not going to think that. That's not in my best interest or anyone else's best interest.
Yeah.
So the opposite in the beginning, the other tool, you asked, those are good. That's a really good question. I don't talk about this often, but the other tool is that if my ego ever wants to do it, I do the opposite. Just do the opposite of what your ego tells you to do. You feel like you need to run away in fear, stick around and hang out and be spacious with it and just relax.
Hmm.
The opposite of the ego is always going to be love or expansion or empowerment or things that are in your best interest.
That's very beautiful. So share with us how we can learn more and tap into your wisdom.
Okay, so I have a few things now that I'm happy to say I put together because I've been doing one-on-one work with people mostly, or actually working in schools with kids or in hospitals or prison settings and things like that. But that was like me to mostly to one other person lots of times. Now I feel like I really want people to be able to access this experience of living in heaven on earth much more readily. I also believe that we already have an enlightened being within us, all of us, that we appear to make this like oh, that's only for special people. I believe that when we begin to live this path that's paved in miracles and see them tangibly and experience them tangibly for ourselves all day, every day, I really believe in A Course in Miracles, it says, if you're not experiencing miracles all day, every day, you're not living your true path.
Hmm.
I'm paraphrasing that, but that's what it says. And I believe that because I live miracles all day, every day, just like us being roommates, not a surprise, but we have these things in common. And so I have a new course coming out, but I also have some meditations and things to share with people. They could go to from pain to the number two power.com
From pain to power.com, and the two is the number two.
is the
Mhm.
number two, and find a wonderful little micro teaching from me, kind of teaching like this, but only 11 minutes, and then a little PDF that goes along with that to remind them of the points that I'm saying if they ever feel themselves stuck.
Yeah.
I also have a meditation that you're going to give a link to that would help them access that vision I was talking about, see miracles now, not wait for some mystic experience to happen, but
Yeah.
let's start tapping this now. I have a podcast called Miracle Renegade where I talk about these kinds of things to my mentee Christian, who's a miracle renegade wannabe. Kind of fun, and just talking about things in life from the eyes of how we can all see this. And just maureenwhitehouse.com is my website. So
Oh, I love it. Well, Maureen, your story is so powerful and beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with all of us and for boldly and courageously stepping on your path to do the work that you do. And I'm grateful to God for putting us in the same condo as roomies.
My soul sister.
Soul sister. It's really been wonderful. And thank you to all the listeners. This is Creating Abundance, where you can be inspired to create abundant health, wealth, and happiness in your life. I'm Alana Cahoon. Until the next time, namaste. Thank you for listening to Creating Abundance. Be sure to like and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next podcast and get your free ebook at alanacahoon.com/ebook.